My back gave out in a Marriott stairwell while dragging 3 giant pop-up banners and 2 crates of pitch swag up to the 3rd floor because the freight elevator was reserved for the real staff. That's how the day started. By 7:40 a.m., I had already iced my lower spine with a stolen bag of peas from the hotel kitchen, fixed a corrupted Excel macro from my phone in the back of an Uber, and talked our CFO down from a panic spiral because the data room folder names didn't feel fundable. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. I was running on adrenaline, protein bars, and spite. But the pitch deck was perfect. The compliance summaries were bulletproof, and all the egos, at least for now, were mostly duct taped in place. If you're enjoying this kind of chaos, and God help you if you are, do me a favor. Smash that like button and hit subscribe. 97% of folks just lurk here for free stories and vanish like our CTO during expense audits. Your click, it actually keeps our little team breathing and caffeinated. All right, back in. The startup was called Syntexia. Don't worry, it sounds like a skincare brand, but we sold AI-integrated warehouse logistics dashboards. I was the director of operations, which is startup speak for woman who does everything no one else knows how to do. Travel bookings? Me. Data room version control? Me. Late night ramen runs for execs having a strategy panic? You guessed it, me again. Richard, our CEO, once introduced me to a major VC as our scheduling guru. I built the entire vendor ecosystem and negotiated our Series B procurement contracts. But sure, let's go with scheduling guru. He said it with that smirking tone men use when they want to compliment you and erase you at the same time. No one knew the full weight of the company like I did. I'd memorized every investor's quirks, tracked every legal addendum, and double-checked every rough draft email our CFO drunkenly sent at 1 a.m. I had a sixth sense for chaos. I didn't brag, I just got it done. There was one moment, months back, that I thought about more than I probably should have. We're at this overstuffed networking mixer in Chicago, the kind where men named Brett drink Negriness and say let's sync offline. I was waiting for the service elevator to haul up demo gear when the buyer's legal rep Evelyn stepped in beside me. Mid-40s maybe, clean suit, tired eyes, calm as a still lake. She asked me if I worked for Syntexia. I said yes, then immediately clarified. I do logistics and ops. I make sure nobody walks into a pitch with spinach in their teeth or the wrong version of the deck. I meant it as a joke. She didn't laugh, just nodded slowly. So, you're the reason the place hasn't burned down yet, I shrugged. She asked how long I'd been doing this. I told her since before the founders knew how to spell EBITDA. Then she said it, just offhand. People like us always get remembered, just not always at first. It wasn't a compliment. It was an obituary in waiting. We stood in silence for the rest of the elevator ride. She didn't say goodbye. She just stepped off, heels echoing against concrete like punctuation. I forgot about it for a while, until much, much later. Back in the present, I was herding execs through a dry run for the biggest pitch of their lives. We were in the final stages of closing a $200M buyout from a logistics conglomerate, and every word, every breath, every PowerPoint animation was under scrutiny. Richard was foaming at the mouth with buzzwords, scalability, edge disruption, quantified agility. Meanwhile, I was rewriting the company's financial risk disclosure on the fly because the junior counsel forgot that words like probably don't belong in legal copy. I had to fly out a day earlier than everyone else to prep. Alone. No assistant. No hotel transportation arranged, of course. When I went to check the shared itinerary calendar to confirm lodging, my name wasn't listed anywhere. I flagged it in Slack. Richard didn't respond for 3 hours. When he did, it was a single line, your personal logistics are personal. That was it. No explanation. No sorry. Just one smug, dismissive sentence. Turns out, Richard and the other execs were staying at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. I was booked at a Days Inn on the outskirts, next to a defunct gas station and a 24-hour liquor store where the clerk kept offering me expired protein shakes on the house. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the motel comforter which smelled faintly of lemon-scented despair and stared at my inbox. No thank yous, no great job, just new tasks, new deadlines, and a subject line I hadn't seen in months, follow-up from elevator chat Evelyn. That night I opened it, finally let myself remember. The first time Richard mentioned the buyout, he did it the way some guys mention a boat they technically don't own yet. Chest puffed out, tone already victorious. $200M, sweetheart, he said, spinning his whiskey tumbler like he was auditioning for a TV show called Tech Bros, Miami Nights. Biggest deal of my career. Syntexia's finally going global. It was a Thursday night Slack message, sent at 11:43 p.m. I was still at the office because the CFO had accidentally overwritten the cap table in Google Sheets while trying to insert a row for his dry cleaning expenses. Sweetheart, he wrote again, this time as a sign-off. From that moment on, the energy shifted. Richard started dressing like someone who watched a YouTube video called Power Poses for Closers. Our head of product, a very smart woman named Aisha, suddenly invisible in meetings, while Richard talked over her about long-tail warehouse obsolescence models he didn't understand. And every internal meeting began with a cold brew, a monologue, and a smug, offhand, let's keep it tight, team, we've got sharks circling. Sharks apparently meaning the buyer, a Midwestern conglomerate called Blackledge Freight Holdings. Not flashy, but cash-rich and conservative. They wanted our tech to modernize their outdated infrastructure. I read their values page. People first. Process-driven. Respect at every level. Sounded like corporate fluff, but at least it wasn't crypto. The second the buyer showed serious intent, Richard went into war room mode, which in practice meant micromanaging the aesthetics of our presentation slides while outsourcing all actual deliverables to people like me. I was suddenly fielding 20-hour days coordinating cross-functional documentation while being CC'd as an afterthought on every email thread. One day I asked if we'd like to have a central doc tracking the closing checklist. Richard said, let's not overprocess it. I trust you to keep it tidy. That's how I found myself juggling 12 distinct timelines, 5 legal compliance frameworks, and a COO who didn't know the difference between accruals and assets. The schedule was grueling. Blackledge wanted a pitch presentation in person, on-site in Chicago. That was the culmination of a month of hell. I was tasked with handling everything: flights, lodging, pitch decks, legal binders, tech setup, and catering. Yes, catering. Apparently, if you forget gluten-free bagels and a $200 deal, you're not detail-oriented enough for leadership. I stayed late every night. Missed my kids' school concert. Slept on the break room couch once with a hoodie over my eyes and my laptop on my stomach like a defibrillator. When I asked Richard if I could bring an assistant or at least a second pair of hands for pitch day logistics, he waved me off. You're the ops whisperer. One-woman army, right? Right. 3 days before the pitch, he summoned everyone into a Zoom to align the vision. It was less vision, more him yelling about popping on the big stage. Every time I tried to clarify logistics or ask a practical question, flight times, boardroom access, badge requirements, he'd say, we'll circle back. This is strategy time. That's when I noticed something in the shared calendar. Everyone else, Richard, the CFO, the head of strategy, even the junior biz dev guy, was flying out the night before and staying downtown. I, however, had a solo flight booked a full 24 hours earlier. No invite to the group dinner. No mention in the schedule block labeled Leadership Sync plus Buyer Mixer. When I pinged Richard directly to ask about the split timeline, he replied instantly, you'll need to get there early to set up. They're high touch, you understand. I asked about hotel accommodations. He left me on read for 6 hours, then finally sent the now legendary line, your personal logistics are personal. Not company logistics, not Syntexia logistics. Personal. That's when I felt it. Sharp, cold click inside my ribs. The familiar taste of being used then dismissed. I wasn't team. I was infrastructure, like the printer, like the damn coffee machine. But even then, some foolish, exhausted part of me thought, if this deal closes, maybe I can finally rewrite my role. Get on paper what I've already been doing for years. Maybe finally they'll see me, so I booked the earlier flight. I triple-checked the backups. I confirmed the HDMI adapter. I printed out 20 extra copies of the contract summary in case someone spilled Pellegrino on theirs. I packed light. Black slacks, blazer, flats I could run in. And in the side pocket of my suitcase, I slipped a printed copy of Evelyn's old email. Folded once. Smoothed flat, just in case. I stared at the travel confirmation email like it had slapped me across the mouth. One queen bed smoking check-in, 3:00 p.m. location. Extended stay budget in Joliet, Joliet, not Chicago. Not even the suburbs of Chicago. Joliet, 40 minutes from the pitch site in traffic, an hour if you dared breathe during rush hour. The kind of place where the ice machine was probably haunted and the continental breakfast meant bruised bananas and a mystery muffin under a heat lamp. I checked the calendar again, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from fatigue. Nope, there it was. Richard, the CFO, the head of strategy, and even Kyle from business development, who once asked me what Control plus F did, were all staying at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, booked under a special block labeled Exec Team Syntexia Pitch. My name wasn't there, not even in the overflow, so I did what any overworked, underslept logistics mule would do. I made it look like a polite question. Hey Richard, noticed I'm not listed on the main booking. Just checking if I should add myself to the Ritz group rate or if there's a separate plan for me. No answer for 2 hours. Then a Slack ping, no context, no greeting, your personal logistics are personal. No period, no emoji, just that sentence. It took me a second to absorb it. My brain tried to rewrite it into something less hostile. I even refreshed the thread like maybe Slack had glitched and the rest of the message would magically load. But no, that was it. I read it again. Your personal logistics are personal. Not sorry, we missed you, go ahead and book what's easiest. Not let me loop in finance to fix this. Just dismissal, like I'd asked him to pack my lunch or braid my hair. It was the kind of cruelty that hides behind plausible deniability. On paper, he hadn't done anything wrong. I was being sent early to prepare for the most important pitch of the company's existence. That was the job, right? But he hadn't forgotten. He hadn't missed me on the booking. He just didn't see me as part of the room that mattered. I stared at that message until my eyes stung. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I could feel a sharp reply curling in my throat like a match ready to spark. Instead, I typed, "Got it. Will confirm travel and expenses on my end," and I closed the laptop. Quietly, slowly, like it might explode if I slammed it. The next day, I arrived in Chicago before sunrise, no car service. I paid for my own Uber and tipped extra because the driver asked if I was headed to something big, and I didn't have the energy to lie. The motel receptionist didn't look up from her game of Candy Crush when I checked in. She handed me a key card that stuck halfway in the slot before the door finally beeped. The room smelled like burnt fabric and forgotten fast food. There was a single overhead bulb that flickered once when I turned it on, like it too was disappointed in me. I stood there, suitcase by my feet, and for the first time in months I let myself feel it. Not rage, that came later. Embarrassment, that deep, bruising kind. The one that makes you question if maybe you are just overreacting. If maybe they're right not to include you. Maybe you're just ops. Pre-show janitor, not the main event. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened the master file. Final pitch deck, legal docs, contingency folders, reference sheets. All perfect, all mine. Every damn asset Richard would wave around tomorrow and pretend he'd built. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I felt something settle into place inside me, like a knife laid gently on a table. I was no longer doing this for Syntexia, or Richard, or even the deal. I was doing it for her, the version of me who used to believe being the best would be enough. The woman who gave everything and asked for so little it became habit. The one who'd been polite, invisible, and for someone else too, someone I hadn't spoken to since that elevator ride in Chicago. A woman who looked at me and saw it. The grind, the loneliness, the glue holding everything together while everyone else took credit. Evelyn, the buyer's lawyer, the one with the tired eyes and the steel spine. She'd said it like a benediction. People like us always get remembered, just not always at first. I opened her email again. Subject, elevator chat, thank you. Short, kind, no agenda, just acknowledgement. I reread it 3 times. Let the bitterness settle, then sharpen into something else. I didn't need Richard to see me. I just needed her to remember. The motel wine glass had a scratch down the side and smelled vaguely like pine sol, but I filled it anyway. A warm Chardonnay I'd grabbed from the CVS across the street. It tasted like grapes that had given up halfway through fermentation, but I didn't care. My laptop sat on the faded laminate nightstand, humming. An email was open on the screen. From Evelyn Tran, subject, elevator chat, thank you body. It was a pleasure running into you. Your clarity and stamina were obvious even in the elevator. Reminded me why I do this. Stay sharp. Evelyn, I'd read it at least 30 times since she sent it, never responded. I told myself I was too busy, that it was just a pleasantry, that it didn't mean anything. But that wasn't true. I hadn't replied because it did mean something, and I wasn't ready to admit how much. That elevator ride happened months ago, Chicago, the Hilton. Some glossy conference about AI and logistics that boiled down to panelists pretending not to read off cue cards. I was hauling giveaway boxes to the service elevator because the founders were too busy taking selfies under the event signage. Evelyn stepped in with a reusable coffee cup and a tired look that felt like a mirror. I recognized her from the morning's panel, lead counsel for Blackledge Holdings. She was sharp, dry, and had asked the only real question of the day. What happens to your ethics framework when your lead engineer quits mid-rollout? Most of the room blinked. One guy chuckled nervously. She didn't. She glanced at my cart, then at me. Operational support? I laughed. Depends on the hour. Sometimes it's ops. Sometimes it's duct tape. Sometimes I'm just the only one who remembers where the batteries are. She smirked, and they call that being non-essential. We stood in silence for a few floors. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "What keeps you from quitting?" I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. She clarified, "You clearly do the hard work. You're not performing. You're sustaining. So what keeps you here?" No one had ever asked me that, not like that. Not in a tone that didn't sound like pity or passive-aggressive curiosity. I thought for a second, then answered honestly. Because if I leave, it collapses. Maybe not right away, maybe not dramatically, but slowly, quietly. And the people who caused the mess won't clean it up, they'll just move on to the next fire. I stay because I remember where the batteries are. She nodded slowly. That's the real answer. Not for glory, for order. The elevator dinged. She stepped off. Before the doors closed, she turned back. People like us always get remembered. Just not always at first. It was such an odd thing to say. Not exactly comforting. Almost like a warning. I didn't know what to do with it back then. I do now. Sitting there in that motel room with the stained curtains and the humming HVAC, I realized something. Evelyn hadn't just noticed me, she saw me. Saw past the fake titles, the corporate costumes, the way Richard introduced me like I was a glorified calendar. She saw the woman in the trenches, when making the system run while everyone else called themselves visionaries. And she remembered. That meant something. It meant everything. I sipped the awful wine, closed her email, opened the master pitch folder again. I wasn't going to sabotage the deal. That's not who I was. This was my work. My fingerprints were on every line, every chart, every legal document fine-tuned to within an inch of perfection. But I'd stopped being invisible, whether Richard knew it or not. Someone else was watching now. Someone who understood that logistics wasn't grunt work, it was the backbone. And the woman in the motel down the highway? She wasn't just the warm-up act anymore. I was at the venue by 5:40 a.m. The janitor let me in with a grunt and a plastic keycard that barely worked. My blazer was still damp from ironing it on the motel nightstand using a towel and a coffee mug filled with hot water. Wi-Fi had gone out around 3 o'clock a.m., so I'd preloaded every version of the pitch deck to a USB drive and emailed backups to myself, to the printer rep, and to an old Yahoo account I hadn't used since college. No margin for error, not today. The conference room was a frostbitten shade of beige, windowless, carpeted like a nursing home, and way too cold from the overzealous AC. I set up the projector, laid out the packets, wiped down every coffee cup. I knew where everyone would sit. Richard at the head, me off to the side, laptop open, ready to jump in when the numbers needed defending, but only when summoned. The rest of the team waltzed in around 8:30 a.m. looking like they'd just gotten back from a spa retreat. Richard was wearing a new suit, dark navy, expensive, smug. He gave me a nod without looking up from his phone. "You get here early?" he asked, still typing. I smiled. "Not really, just didn't sleep." He chuckled like I'd told a cute joke and muttered, "That's the spirit." By 9 o'clock a.m., the buyer's team began trickling in. Finance, product leads, operations, sharp-eyed people with clipboards and very little small talk. I recognized two of them from prior Zooms. No Evelyn yet. Richard opened with a joke about warehouse drones and streamlined airspace. It didn't land. Then it was my turn, the ops section. The numbers. Roadmaps? I'd built this slide deck with blood and spreadsheets. I was 2 slides in, describing how our tech reduced last-mile delivery errors by 43%, a stat the buyer had flagged as mission critical, when Richard interrupted. "Let's not bore them with the weeds," he said with a laugh, waving a hand like I was a TED talk getting the hook. "She's our logistics guru, keeps the trains running. What I really want to show you is how we're thinking about vertical scaling." He clicked ahead 4 slides, skipping half of what I'd prepped. I sat back, smiled like I was fine, like that didn't land like a slap, like the phrase "keeps the trains running" wasn't code for knows her place. And then Evelyn walked in. Calm, polished, quiet. A black suit, minimal jewelry, the kind of entrance that doesn't draw attention but commands it anyway. She sat near the back. Didn't interrupt, just watched. Her eyes found mine for half a second, and in that second something shifted. I didn't smile, I didn't nod. I just held her gaze long enough to say everything Richard wouldn't let me say out loud. Richard, of course, noticed her too, but in the worst way. He stood taller, dialed up the swagger, and tossed out phrases like expansion readiness and AI native logistics protocol like candy at a parade. The deck was barely visible in him. He was monologuing. He pointed to a slide I had built, one that clearly showed our weakest link in onboarding, and said, "We've bulletproofed this. Took some heroics from the team, especially yours truly, but we're airtight." I'd spent 3 weekends fixing that exact issue. Alone, no help, no sleep, no thanks. "Everything we do is best in class," Richard continued, "from our vendor onboarding to our travel protocols. We spare no expense to keep quality consistent." I felt Evelyn watching me again. No expense, huh? I didn't move, didn't flinch. But inside, I felt something cold and sharp beginning to glow. Not quite rage, rage is loud. This was colder, quieter, a kind of surgical stillness. He didn't know he was bleeding in front of a lawyer trained to spot fine cracks in million-dollar deals. He didn't know she'd ridden in freight elevators too. Evelyn said nothing. Just turned a page in her binder and kept listening, as if letting him dig the hole was more polite than stopping him mid-shovel. The presentation ended. There were scattered nods. The COO looked pale. The junior biz dev guy was visibly sweating. I sat in my chair, hands folded, eyes steady, waiting. Evelyn was still watching. The room had that post-pitch stillness, the kind where everyone's pretending to be relaxed, but their internal organs are running marathons. I could smell the adrenaline coming off Kyle like Axe body spray in fear. Richard leaned back, arms folded, looking like a man who thought he'd just sold the Brooklyn Bridge for full asking price. "Any final questions?" he asked, grinning like we were all about to high-five over champagne and stock options. There was a pause, just long enough to register as uncomfortable. Then Evelyn closed her binder, placed both palms flat on the table, and tilted her head just slightly. "Yes," she said, her voice calm and low. "One last thing." You could feel the oxygen get nervous. Even Richard straightened up. "Where?" she asked, eyes scanning the table slowly. "Is your team staying?" A question so soft it felt almost lazy. But the room snapped to alert. Richard blinked. "Our team?" She nodded once. "Yes, I'm always curious about how prospective partners handle logistics during key engagements." Richard grinned wider. "Only the best," said with a casual wave. "Ritz-Carlton downtown. We figured if we're going to bring our A-game, we should be rested and focused, right?" He even chuckled, trying to turn it into a charming little moment of executive wisdom. "Whole leadership teams there," he added. "Nothing but top shelf." Evelyn's eyes slid across the table, stopped on me. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just dropped my gaze to the legal packet in front of me. One breath, two, that was enough. The pause that followed didn't last more than 3 seconds, but it was brutal, like a cracked joint being held just before the twist. Evelyn turned her gaze back to Richard. No change in her tone, no raised voice, no drama. Interesting, she said, and nothing more, but I felt it like gravity changed. Richard, oblivious, laughed. We don't cut corners. Travel, food, tools, we invest in quality across the board. The CFO made a soft, wheezing noise next to him. I watched his face shift just slightly, a flicker of recognition. He was remembering something, probably the part where I emailed them about the motel confirmation, asking if it was a mistake. The email they'd all ignored. The COO cleared his throat. Is there a concern about logistics support? We had everything handled. Didn't we? He looked at me like I might nod and save him. I didn't. I wasn't about to lie to patch their reputations back together with my silence. Not anymore. The silence that followed felt like ice creeping through the cracks of a frozen lake. Evelyn didn't answer the COO. She didn't nod. She just leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. Richard, sensing something was off but too arrogant to name it, fumbled for recovery. I mean, obviously, we value our team across the board. Our ops lead here. He gestured at me without turning his head, has been instrumental. She flew in early to get everything squared away. The way he said it like he deserved credit for letting me carry the world on my back. Evelyn didn't move. Her hands remained folded on her binder, knuckles relaxed. I could feel the CFO sweating beside me. The COO's foot tapped anxiously under the table. I didn't know what Evelyn would do. I didn't know when she'd do it, but something was coming. The tension was no longer mine to carry. It belonged to them now. And Evelyn, calm, composed, devastating Evelyn, wasn't looking at Richard anymore. She was looking past him, at the decision. Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't even blink differently. But she did something far more lethal. She closed her binder, not a rushed close, not a passive we're done here gesture. No, this was deliberate. Pages aligned, pen clipped with a click, that small. Restrained movement carried the weight of a verdict. Then she stood, calm as a lake before a storm. No scramble, no sigh, just vertical, measured. Her chair rolled back with a whisper. The room froze. Richard, who had been reclining like a man basking in his own genius, jerked forward like someone just slapped the poker chips out of his hands. Evelyn, he said, forcing a grin. Are we done? She didn't answer. Just turned and walked slowly toward the door. Not power walking, not storming out. Just a steady, terrifying pace that made every executive in that room feel suddenly underdressed and overpaid. Richard stood halfway, one hand extended like a preacher mid-sermon. Wait, did we do something wrong? She paused at the threshold. Turned just slightly, enough for her voice to float cleanly across the table. We take team treatment seriously, she said. We don't fund exclusion. That was it. No accusations. No pitchforks. Just a simple statement of values delivered like gospel. Then she was gone. The silence left behind wasn't just awkward, it was surgical. Nobody moved. The only sound was Kyle nervously drumming his fingers on his Yeti water bottle until Richard shot him a look sharp enough to draw blood. The CFO coughed into his hand and muttered. She didn't say no, technically. The COO was pale, muttering something about sending a clarifying memo. Richard stared at the door like he could will her back into existence. Like the deal might still be hovering in the hallway, waiting for an apology or a charm offensive to glue it back together. He turned to me, finally turned to me as if I was supposed to jump in, fix it, spin it, save him. But I didn't move, I just looked at him. Blank, controlled, not smirking, not smug, just quiet. Because for once, silence wasn't something that protected them. Protected me. I'd spent years swallowing disrespect so subtle you'd need a microscope and a therapist to name it. Years making other people look brilliant while being thanked with backhanded jokes and forgotten credits. But now the air was shifting. They weren't the ones being watched anymore. They were the ones exposed. Richard hit the lobby like a man chasing a train that had already left the station. Get her on the phone. He barked at no one in particular, spinning in a frantic circle like Evelyn might still be hiding behind a ficus. Call someone, legal, BD, finance, I don't care who. We clarify, we recover, we respond. The front desk receptionist raised an eyebrow and offered him a mint. The CFO was pacing like a dog in a thunderstorm, muttering it's just a misunderstanding. She didn't say no, not technically. The COO had already pulled out his phone and was whispering furiously into it, something about soft commitments and damage control. I stood off to the side near a fake potted plant, my rolling suitcase already by my feet. Packed, zipped, ready. Richard turned on me next. You saw her face, he snapped. What was that? What did you say to her? Did you, was this you? There it was, the old tactic. If it burns down, blame the woman carrying the fire extinguisher. I looked at him. One long, still look. You said my logistics were personal, so I handled them. That shut him up for half a second. He scoffed, then turned to the others, arms flailing now. She's overreacting. She's projecting. God, everyone's so fragile these days. Like I'm supposed to book her a sweet and foot rub just for doing her job? The lobby echoed with his voice, growing shriller by the sentence. I could see the hotel manager watching from behind the front desk now. Two bellhops exchanged a glance. Nearby woman on a laptop subtly turned up her volume to record. Then a text pinged on Richard's phone. He went pale, then another, then three more. He read the screen, face draining like a faulty K-cup. Oh my God, the CFO whispered. The group chat had started. Investor 1, why did Evelyn walk out? Just got a note from their GC. Are we dead in the water? Investor 2, hearing something about employee treatment? What the hell happened? Investor 3, fix this, now. I didn't have access to their group thread, but I didn't need to. The panic was all over their faces. Richard's hand trembled as he tried to draft a response. The COO looked like he wanted to dissolve into the hotel floor. This wasn't just awkward anymore. This was blood in the water. I reached down, picked up my suitcase, and checked the zipper one more time, not because I needed to, but because I could. Richard finally noticed I was leaving. Wait, where are you going? He snapped, voice cracking. I glanced at the time, my train's in 40. I've got work to do. He blinked. You're not staying for the debrief? I gave him a soft, polite smile. There's nothing left to debrief. He took a step toward me like he wanted to bark something else, but then stopped. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe it was the fact that, for once, he couldn't spin this. Evelyn hadn't made a scene, she didn't need to, but she had made a statement, and the world she lived in, it listened. I rolled my suitcase past him, past the CFO, past the PR guy who was now frantically whispering about damage mitigation and controlling the story. They hadn't fired me, but they wouldn't get the chance. I was already gone. The train ride home was quiet. I didn't listen to music, didn't answer texts, just let the silence sit next to me like a long-lost friend. The kind that doesn't ask questions or force conversation, just rides with you until the panic drains from your bones. By the time I got off at the little station outside my hometown, the sun had already dipped behind the Dollar General, and everything smelled like wet pavement and late August air. I walked into my apartment around 9:30 p.m., kicked off my shoes, and let my suitcase lean against the wall. Didn't even unpack, not yet. Just stood there in the soft light of my living room, breathing, no Slack notifications. No last minute just checking in emails, no Richard. Then my phone buzzed, one new message. Subject, no rush from Evelyn Tranbody, I've seen your work. We may need someone with your eye for logistics. Let me know if you're free next quarter, just that. No pitch, no fluff, no smiley face. Yet it felt like a hand on the shoulder. A door opened without force, a yes without needing to beg for it. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then, without really meaning to, I laughed. A soft, real laugh that came from somewhere deep, buried under 5 years of false starts and swallowing pride. Not gloating, not spite, just free. I didn't reply, not yet. She hadn't asked for decision, just left the offer there like a gift I could unwrap when I was ready. I boiled water, dropped a tea bag into my favorite chipped mug, the one with the faded world's okayest mom decal my kid gave me after a particularly chaotic science fair, and curled into the corner of my couch. Outside, a siren whined in the distance. Inside, everything was still. I finally unzipped the suitcase, unfolded my blazer, hung it neatly, pulled out the binder Evelyn had once closed without a word and tucked it into the trash, somewhere far away. Richard was probably still yelling into a speakerphone, insisting the optics weren't that bad. Somewhere, a junior PR rep was drafting their third version of We Remain Committed to Employee Equity. Let them. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to defend. Someone powerful had seen me, and this time, I didn't need to carry anyone else's weight, just my own. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.